To hit record now. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Angie Barker Jackson and I am the Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Berkeley School of Theology. We are so delighted that you have joined us for today's First Friday Lunch and Learn. It is February 2nd, 2024, and I believe that you will find our topic and presentation very timely as we embark on Black History Month. Today, we'll be shining a light on injustice and seeking to create an increasingly just world together. If you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, I invite you to do so. And if you are in a part of the world where it's time for lunch or another type of sustenance, we welcome you to enjoy that during the presentation, as long as you stay muted. This series is sponsored and planned by the Alumni Engagement Office. Melissa LeBeff, Assistant Director of Alumni and Donor Engagement, is co-hosting with me today. Melissa will monitor the chat, so if you have questions that you want to drop in there throughout the presentation for Dr. Carroll, you may. Also, he will be offering some interactive space within his presentation for us. So a reminder also that Melissa is always your source for information about future events. And I appreciate Melissa for all that she does. These lunch and learns have been designed with three purposes in mind: learning, connecting, and being. Each month, we feature a different topic and a new guest. And our hope is that the topics will stretch and challenge our minds, that we will connect and reconnect with others in the BST network, and that this will be a space of radical belonging. Today's guest presenter is a BST affiliate faculty in ecological studies, Reverend Dr. Ambrose Carroll Sr. Additionally, Dr. Carroll is a local church pastor and one of our country's premier practical theologians. He has academic credentials from Florida Memorial College, Morehouse School of Religion, United Theological Seminary, and Golden Gate University. Dr. Carroll has served various churches as youth and young adult pastor, interim pastor, senior pastor, and founding pastor. While pastoring in Denver, Colorado, the church he led became one of the first foundationally environmentally friendly green churches in our nation. That church was featured in Fast Company magazine and on CNN as one of the most innovative business ideas of 2011, and was described as, quote, taking faith-based initiatives to a new level, end quote. Since that time, Dr. Carroll has expanded his work into the Bay Area by creating a national campaign to green the church, a national nonprofit charged to educate the Black church and lead in the creation of sustainable programs to undergird the work of developing green and efficient church buildings. He and Green the Church were profiled on CNN in 2019, detailing how Black churches are mobilizing nationwide to combat climate change and pollution. The movement was also featured in a Jet magazine article, and Dr. Carroll regularly contributes as a writer to HuffPost.com. Because of his work with Green the Church and its national reach, he was selected by Congresswoman Maxine Waters to be present in the Senate chamber for the 2017 confirmation hearing of Senator Jeff Sessions for Attorney General, where he joined other prominent and progressive voices of concerned clergy around the country. Dr. Carroll is involved in the Home and Foreign Mission District Association, serving the churches of the Berkeley Black Ecumenical Ministers Alliance, the California State Baptist Convention, and the Steering Committee of California Interfaith Power and Light. Finally, Dr. Carroll is married to Katrisa and the father of 3 children. We are delighted that you would make time to be with the BST community and eager to hear your thoughts on Black, green, and traumatized, environmental racism, and Black theology. Without further ado, please welcome Reverend Dr. Ambrose Carroll.
All right. Thank you, Angie. So very glad to be here. To Melissa, to Dr. Brenneman, and all of our colleagues. This is no time to play, to dream, to drift. We have hard work to do and loads to lift. Shun not the struggle, for the struggle, I tell you, is the gift. Be strong. Good day again to each and every one of you all. So very glad to be present with you all today. Man, our friend Dr. Evans, Pastor Webster, God bless you. I was ordained at the Beth Eden Church. I started to wear my shirt this afternoon too, Dr. Webster. Amen. Let's see here now. I'm just elated to be in community with us on today. As I shared, I graduated from Morehouse School of Religion, ITC, in '94. My last year I was blessed. Dr. Dash was my advisor, and I was able to come home and do a year-long internship at the Beth Eden Church with Dr. Gilletto James. A very dear time. I had to do some pastoral care work in San Francisco, some clinical pastoral education up on Parnassus, and just really remembering and reflecting on those days, starting out in ministry. I think I may have been 23 years old. My breath was still smelling of Similac. Somebody will get that on Tuesday. And but the people were so very gracious. Pastor James and the Beth Eden Church. And during that time, of course, I had to finish my worship. So even though I graduated from the Interdenominational Theological Center, I did my pastoral care, marriage and family therapy, and my worship class at what was then the American Baptist Theological Seminary. And so this institution is a part of my learning, a part of the very fiber of what we attempt to do in ministry. And so again, thank you all so very much. Now, I just got back. I was in Atlanta, where we are starting Green the Church, Georgia, this week. And then my intentionality was to be in Dallas on today. Reverend Dr. Frederick Haynes, our friend and brother, was installed last night as the, I guess, chairman and CEO of Rainbow Push in Dallas. And so I was on my way, but the plane that I was on decided not to go. And so I found myself, I got on the plane and I came home. Amen. And I said all of that just to say, since I missed that gathering, I'm feeling very preachy this morning. So I need a good timekeeper. Amen. I'm feeling very preachy. So you all keep me on time. And I want us to engage today as well. So let me see. I want to do maybe two or three things. I want to take some time and just introduce to you all Green the Church and a little bit about my history and how we came to it. And then I want to open up this notion of Black, Green, and Traumatized and share with you from which that came and why that is our starting point for today, and talk a little bit about the challenges that we have on this planet together and how then we can overcome them. And then I want to move to some practical things that we are attempting to do as a ministry. How does that sound? Does that sound all right? Fantastic. All right. We don't want that. All right, just a few pieces. This is a quote that I love from Representative John Lewis. When we take our air, water, and land for granted, when we show a simple lack of respect for nature and our environment, we unmake God's good creation. Just a little bit about who I am. I am the son of Reverend Ben Carroll Sr. and Ruby Carroll, who both came from a farming community, a sharecropping community in northern Louisiana, about 20 minutes now outside of Shreveport. I always tell people, although I'm from Oakland, California, that the family is originally from Hollywood. That would be Holly, Louisiana, down in the woods. And being able to go home during the summers, I think really helped to shape our lives, because although we grew up in very urban environments, be that St. Louis, Missouri, be that Compton, California, or even Santa Ana in Orange County, we would go home in the summertime. And at home in Holly, Louisiana in 1979, early 80s, my grandparents, my grandfather was born in 1900, so whatever year it was, he was that age. The home that my dad grew up in still did not have running water. Still, so we remember those days where we may not have had a lot of protein that they ate, other than catfish that came through the pond, or they talked about possum. I don't think I ever ate that. But on those communities, they grew a lot of food, always fresh peas that needed to be picked, corn that needed to be shucked. You could reach down and bust a watermelon open while it was still in the vine. And these were people who were in states of poverty, but still ate very healthy diets. We think about those pieces. I think those things help to shape my notion of environmentalism, although environmentalism itself was not our language. Being close to the land was a part of our reality. And no matter what individuals went through, putting your hand in that deep, rich soil was always life-giving. And so always thankful for that, thankful for the well that sat in the middle of the property where my cousins would come from their homesteads, walking down to get water to cook with, or water to bathe with, but that water that came from that well that was so good to the taste, you know what I mean? That was so fresh and clean. At this time, 40 years, 50 years later, has such level of toxicities because of the fracking that's going on that land. And I may not have mentioned that although my grandparents were economically poor, that as we drove into their land, there were always oil pumps, right, from neighbors who lived next door, who were very wealthy, who were pumping oil from up under the land itself. And now those shales are being fracked, and there are levels of toxicity. So maybe I started Black, Green, and Traumatized a little early, but I think this is, part of the picture and the narrative. Really quick, 2008, 2009, after serving as youth pastor of Third Baptist, entered the pastorate, moved to Colorado. While I was serving at Third Baptist, was able to work with Van Jones when he was doing Books Not Bars and some of those other pieces. In 2009, I read his book, The Green Job Economy, and really felt that one of my peers had articulated for us the big tent issue of our day. I really thought of the environmental movement in that particular way. So I wanted to introduce. I met Sally Bingham with Interfaith Power and Light, and noted that even though I became a Green for All Fellow with Van Jones, that there were not a lot of people of faith, or rather there were not a lot of people who were part of the Black church tradition. And when I met Sally Bingham, I found my tribe. I found people of faith from every faith group, 40 states around the country with international reach. But although there were a lot of people of faith, there were not a lot of people of color. There were not a lot of Black churches present. And so we wanted to really, I always say, wake up the sleeping giant that is the Black church on these issues. And we started Green the Church to be a repository and a catalyst to start telling the story and answering the question, is the Black church interested in climate change and sustainability? I believe the answer was yes, and that it was simply not our language, but we had our own way of thinking about it, talking about it, and doing it. And so we set out to tell stories. Our 3 pillars center around amplifying green liberation theology, promoting sustainable practices, and building power for political and economic change. That's just by way of introductions. Any questions as I open this up? Any questions or thoughts? Let me just hear some voices out there. I know somebody's probably having lunch, eating something real good. Just break away for a minute and say hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Karen. All right. Any questions? Anyone ever been a part of a new ministry? Anyone ever had my past when I started preaching? I told him I was called to preach. He said, "Oh, you have a divine unction." And then he said, "It may just be something bad you ate last night," right? Anybody ever felt compelled to start a new work or to do something differently? Anybody want to respond just to this notion of green stuff?
Could you say, Dr. Carroll, could you say a bit about the reach of the phenomenal reach, in my opinion, of Green the Church since you started so many years ago? It has really grown into a nationwide movement.
Thank you so much. Yes, at present, we've interacted. We have about 3,000 congregations nationwide. This year, we're starting Green the Church Georgia. Officially, last year we started Green the Church DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. We are in Louisiana and Florida, with some work also in the state of Missouri. When we started having these Green the Church summits. And so we would move around from city to city, really telling stories and making sure that we didn't parachute in, but doing the work for 6 months prior to see what congregations had going on. So thanks for that question.
I may want to offer a comment, if I may. Thanks, first of all, for bringing up this topic. But this topic, it really resonates, at least with the community that I'm involved with, specifically on the sustainability. And it's very timely that we just had a major meeting just a couple of months ago. And I was wondering if along the same SDG or overall United Nations green venture, I was wondering if you could share some thoughts on what from the Catholic domain, Pope Francis, for instance, the work that he's done on Laudato Si and exhortations and bringing a little more harmony within the faith perspective. That would be very interesting to hear your articulation of your perception of where is that headed. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, we are we are in conversations now with members of Laudato Si, who have been, talking about having, conversations. And most of the work that we do is interfaith, to the point that we're trying to, step back and make sure that we're having it from a Christian perspective as well. And so they're giving some leadership on that. Well, I was actually pastoring at the church by the side of the road at the time of that papal bull, and we had communities come in maybe for a week, and we had individuals, we packed it out with a large interfaith gathering just to read through it and to go over it. And so I'll talk a little bit more about theology as we move forward, but thanks for raising that question.
So Dr. Carroll,
Yes.
thanks so much for all the work you're doing. Have you run across, or do you run across, particularly in the faith community, regardless of ethnicity, an appropriation or maybe misappropriation of a kind of duality in Genesis of subduing the earth versus being stewards of the earth?
Amen. A very good question, and because he raises very good questions. We appreciate Dr. Webster is actually on our steering committee and then board, and those are the pieces that are challenges. The answer is yes, and because we do this work from an interfaith lens, and we try to do this work in a way that everybody can participate. There are some congregations that are yet very conservative, and so even the language that we use, depending on where we are, could change. A lot of times we talk about creation care because to talk about climate change has political pieces, and so depending on where individuals are who are working in this space, trying to do the best that they can in their context, we are always very careful to meet them at the point of their need and to work with other organizations outside of the fray. One such is the organization of young conservatives that have chapters on a lot of our universities around the country. We are learning so much from each other in terms of how to engage young people. So even though our theologies differ, the fact that we're really trying to tackle this question together gives us an opportunity really to sup together and really to move. Yes, Dr. Tribble.
Hello, my brother, and greetings. Please pass on to your sister, Emily. My question involves the people in the pews. As you are gaining these numbers of churches, what are there, let me put it this way, are there expectations, and what are they for churches, congregations, to then do something to engage their members, their congregation? What hands-on opportunities, what learning opportunities do the members get from those who have joined your organization?
Excellent question. I think the more that they get, the merrier we will be. We ultimately we won't be successful until this piece is a part of our culture, or is a known piece in terms of our culture. Culturally, it is so very at the center and fiber of who we are. But until we're able to articulate that and be at the table with others, it won't be clear. So we believe every church ought to have a green team. We believe that if your church has a praise team, it ought to have a green team. And that throughout every auxiliary of our church, we ought to be thinking what is our biblical hermeneutic. We ought to be thinking philosophically, our choirs, our music, how we talk about the planet. Is it this, oh, wretched world is not my home, right? Or is it music that more so embraces? And I'll talk a little bit more just about our programming. Well, I'll say it now and then I'll move on because I go on and preach. But throughout the year, we had our first camping trip. So we want to make sure that we do a large Green the Church camping trip. We want to have advocacy days so that people can go to our city officials, to Sacramento. We want to have toxic tours so our young people come together to understand where we are and the toxicities around us. I grew up on 98th and E, right adjacent to the Granny Goose potato chip company, right? I love the smell of Granny Goose in the morning, although those toxins was killing me, right? Because I did not understand that we lived in dangerous places. So those are some of the things that we do. But I think throughout our ushers, understanding disaster preparedness, that a lot of the things that we do already, we just want to make sure that we are acknowledging it. So thank you. I better move on because y'all gonna think I'm trying to be Episcopalian and y'all gonna think I'm super Baptist. All right, let me see. Yeah, so I want to open up. I have a video that I'd like to share as we talk about this next piece. Thank you all. You are a wonderful audience. You're doing great. This is just about a 2-minute piece for the time I had the opportunity to serve at the church by the side of the road in Berkeley, after which we actually reformed the congregation, the Renewal Worship Center. And quite recently, it's been about 6 months, that congregation merged with McGee Avenue Baptist Church. Pastor Smith is my pastor, so I just wanted to share those pieces. And take a listen.
My name is Reverend Dr. Ambrose Carroll, pastor of the church by the side of the road and founder of the Green the Church campaign. And when I read Van Jones' book, The Green Job Economy, it really spoke to me as being something that was such a big tent. When you talk about the earth itself and the planet, and no matter what other conversations you're having, whether it's about poverty or whether it's about different forms of justice, this environmental movement, for me, I believe, was the quintessential movement of our day and of our time. I was working with Green for All. There were a lot of people of color, but not a lot of people who embraced Western religion. And I really felt like these two worlds really need to collide. We needed to get the African American church really involved and engaged in this movement. And so we founded the Green the Church campaign to do just that. The African American community and the inner city community are often the people who end up on the front lines of the pollution in this country. We have not awakened the social giant that is the African American church on the issue of climate change and on the issue of environmentalism, but we are setting out the work. We're in Berkeley, and when I first came, something as small as we didn't have recycling. And our recycling bill was probably $400 a month just for waste. And so we began to kind of talk about it, and we were able to cut our waste bill in half. And people were able to sit back and say, okay, we have worked with our energy company to make sure that all of our lighting has been completely changed out. We are in communication with Revolve Solar to possibly bring solar. Another thing that we instituted, physical sustainability. And so how we do food here is purposefully different. Our feed program on second Sundays is one of the healthiest, I'm told, in the community. So all of this, kind of hodgepodge of stuff, things that we're doing here, that's definitely moving the dial. Is it where I would want it to be? No. But then again, I'm a believer, so I think all things are possible.
All right. Just a clip again to encompass this notion today of Black, green, and traumatized. This is a statement that has been co-convened. It really comes from the brilliant mind of Reverend Pastor Michael Smith, pastor of McGee Avenue Church. He has a great way of naming things. He's currently one of our doctoral students, working on a piece that he entitles Black Earth Theology. Very excited about that work. as they talk about food. But we were met together and really just talking about the impact of and the environmental traumas that are present. A few years ago, we started a piece and we had environmental healing circles where we brought individuals out to talk about, this was right after the fires, the impact of environmental trauma, and then understanding it not necessarily as a separate justice issue, but a justice issue in and of itself. A lot of times when we talk about the environment, we look at it like, you know, we've got enough going on in our communities. We don't need one more thing. But the reality is that so many in our communities, there are more dead Black bodies that are caused by environmental toxins than there are by gun violence or police brutality. There are Martin King, when he was assassinated, he was in Memphis attempting to help those workers who work bringing in the trash, right? And he went because of environmental issues. He went because people had working conditions that were poisonous. And so these issues for us are not separate. In the West, we have a way of bifurcating everything, of separating things. But the reality is these issues are simply justice issues. So how we are affected by that, whether it is police brutality or living, I grew up again in the flats, in places, and in Oakland, when I'm driving on 580 and I see a truck, I get very offended. I said, trucks are not supposed to be on 580. Trucks are supposed to be on 880. But what I didn't realize all these years is that people who look like I look are up and down the 880 corridor, right? And so that was a purposeful, very marginalized thing to do in terms of housing, where people live and how people live. And whether it's those things or police brutality or our school systems that oftentimes fail us, but I don't know if they fail because the reality is our school systems are meant in order to keep people in a certain space, even in terms of, you know, at one time, I remember I lived in Denver, Colorado, and the high school that most African Americans went to, I think they had George Washington, they had Ben Franklin, and then they had Manual High School. And I was like, well, who is Mr. Manual? And they say, no, Manual High School is for manual labor, right? And so that blew my mind. However, I will say that I would take a manual high school right now, because at manual high school, you learn the trades. You learn how to be an electrician at manual high school. You learn how to work on automobiles. And so you can be employed and still have home ownership and take care of your children. And so even we no longer have manual high school. And so in Oakland, we no longer have shops. We no longer have places for trade. And so those are, you know, pieces that you step back and look at and understand that people are living in very traumatic spaces and places. I was watching last night on the plane, Judas and the Black Messiah. It took me 2 or 3 years because I just don't do good with movies like that because I'm already traumatized. And as an African American, I am a pretty paranoid fella. But somebody said just because you're paranoid doesn't mean no one is after you. And so all of these pieces, criminalization, and even learning that here in Oakland, as we came migrating from the South, that the individuals who were paid to be police officers, they migrated from the South as well. They went back and got individuals who had years of overseeing Black bodies and brought them into these places and spaces. And so being seen as criminal, being in places and spaces where, like, all of that together from an environmental justice standpoint is a part of the intersection. It is a part of being broken away from that land. And people who are now in urban environments, there are a lot of farmers walking around and they don't know that they are farmers. There are a lot of individuals that have within them the ability to work with animals, right? And the only animals that they can work with are pit bulls, if you understand what I'm saying. And so we find ourselves in very traumatic experiences. I want to, and I know I'm almost done in terms of my time, but I like to move to what it's going to take to heal. And for me, the earth is one move. We are all but one word. That there is sameness in all sentient beings. We all share life. We share breath, the ruah. And it does not matter if you are Homo sapien or if you are fauna or flora. It does not matter if you are an insect. All of it is life. And the real battle that we have right now on this planet is not the survival of the planet itself. It's the survival of humanity's trek upon this planet, right? And I always say that if we lose this battle at this time, as long as my brother, the bumblebee, survives, then life will go on. And so let me switch, and I want to talk about what we are doing presently as we are hosting a series of what we call climate revivals. Everybody repeat after me, Lord, let there be a revival. I'm gonna wait till I hear somebody. And let it begin with me.
And
Or
let
you
it
ought to
begin
say it
with
again.
me.
Lord, let there be a revival.
Lord, let there
Lord,
be a
Lord, let
revival.
there be a revival.
And let it begin with me.
And let it
Let it
begin with
begin
me.
with me.
So I always say Black folk don't consider themselves environmentalists, but we do consider ourselves revivalists. And it does not matter if you're Methodist or Baptist or Apostolic. Black church, we have revival all the time because we believe anything old, decrepit, and decayed can be made brand new again. This is our language. This is how we move. And so we are introducing this notion of revival. I want to play, let me see if I can play a clip again that just takes us to what I consider as the spirit of what we intend. Let me see if I can find. Still away to Jesus, still away home. I got long to stay. Brothers and sisters. All right, I think I'll spare you all the speech. But just wanted to frame that everything that we do from a point of worship. And when we talk about how we make it, even in 2024, and we understand that an election is coming up, and we understand in a very real way the divide, not only in this country, but the level of fear and division on the planet. It is the kind of fear and division that can end societies as we know it. And I believe that everyone is looking to the faith community in order to help interpret, what these bones mean, right? Can these bones live? And I believe that God eternal knows. And I think that the way that we live is that there has to be a great coming together. I believe that what is spirit, right, wants to flow through us. But the spirit of God, that ruah, cannot flow through us until we really learn to come together. All right. Just at about time, let me just share a few things that, again, we are doing this year. And again, we just had our first climate revival at Williams Chapel in Oakland, and our plenary centered around building a low-cost housing on Black-owned land, because the governor has just legislated that they're making it a little easier for us. We want to make sure that our congregations know how to use what we have. Black folk don't own a lot of skyscrapers, but we own a lot of church buildings. When we migrated from the South, our grandparents, even if they could not buy a home for themselves, they sold fried chicken and sweet potato pies, and they had note burning services. I'm old enough to have been at a couple of note burning services, and they paid those buildings off. So sometimes we find ourselves crying with a loaf of bread under our arms. And so as a part of that, Green the Church has we got a $400,000 prize from the Department of Energy to help figure out how to help our congregations, our church buildings decarbonize. In Oakland and Berkeley, our churches have to be 100% electric by 2035, 2040. But we have to understand that the congregations have to know, and then we're going to have funding in these very marginalized places so we can make those changes. A lot of our churches still have boilers and asbestos, and people have not been down there in years. So Green the Church is helping to figure that out and looking for as much support as we can to make sure that we know how to do it, that we build up a workforce that's able to help do it, that we teach our young people a lot of these trades, and that we work on the buildings that we own to do so. But we are going to need help financially from our city officials, from people who love God and understand their own history. And we also talked about renewable energy. Green the Church is working with engineers in order to do what we call a revenue generating microgrid. Then not only are we going to make sure that our buildings are efficient, that there's clean air and clean water, so we can make sure if you're shouting, you're filled with the Holy Ghost and not that it's an asthma attack, right? We want to make sure that we got that part down. And then we want to make sure that we enter this clean tech and this infrastructure conversation. Right now, we want to make sure that our churches can make revenue even from EV charging. So there's EV charging in our communities, and we don't have to wait until somebody else comes, buys land or leases land in order to be a part of this new industry. Because the Black church is in these marginalized communities, we want to make sure that we're using our parking lots, that we're using what we have in our hand to make a difference and to bring down the carbon footprint in our nation. So those were two conversations that we had, decarbonization and renewable energy and energy efficiency. Our next conversation is going to be in April at the McGee Avenue for Earth Day, April 20th. Climate revival will be held, and we're going to talk about food sovereignty. What we eat and how we eat is going to be our conversation. In July, we plan to be at Beth Eden, again, talking about health and wellness, not only physical wellness, but mental and spiritual wellness. And our final conversation will be at Glad Tidings, where we will talk about disaster preparedness, where we bring all of the conversations together and how we talk about being a resilient hub. Outside of that, there are a few programmatic things that we're going to do. Toxic tours. We're going to have a very large-scale camping trip for the entire family at Redwood Alliance in Occidental. We want to take our young people and our older people out to the land. We also want to have Advocacy Day in Sacramento and a documentary film fest. Those are some of the very particular things that we are doing at Green the Church right here in the Bay Area. We're also doing those quarterly events in Louisiana. And in October, we'll have our National Green the Church Summit in Shreveport, Louisiana. And I'm sure I'm at my time. I'll take any questions that we have time for.
Melissa, I know you have one.
Yeah, so we got a question, a direct message. So, oh gosh, now there's like a little, I don't know. So it's something's covering up part of it. As much as environmental concerns are of global significance, in Oakland, we are in a political legal fight to keep coal from being shipped through the city to a proposed terminal that would ship the coal to China. What is your experience or perspective on that fight?
Yeah, so Green, the church has been a part of that fight from the beginning. And interestingly enough, a year or two before that came into being, we held our first Green the Church Summit. And when we did it, I said we were going to do it in West Oakland. And we did it at the St. John Baptist Church with the Oakland Ministers Alliance, because we believe that the people who live in these places have to have this knowledge and understanding. It was hard, y'all. It was like pulling teeth, but I was glad to do it there. And interestingly enough, at the time, we did it at a church where we couldn't have women in ministry. But you see, a part of what it means to be marginalized is that we're also marginalized in terms of education. We're marginalized in terms of understanding. And so we fought to make sure that the people who really need the conversation get it. A few months after that, or a year or so after that, even though it was like pulling teeth, some of the same clergy persons came because the people who were bringing in the coal gave them some money and said it's going to be jobs. And then the same cats had a whole meeting, talking about, but we stood up and we, because these are my brothers, right? And we stood up and we had that conversation. And if it was just because of the preachers, it would have went one way. But because the members, the individuals who still live in West Oakland, a lot of us preachers, we don't live where we preach, right? So, but the people who lived in West Oakland still came, stood up, even their members, and said no coal in Oakland. And that was the first piece. What we did after that was we made sure that I said one thing that I didn't do when I came talking about environmentalism and trees, I didn't talk about jobs, right? And so we went back to the drawing board and we talked to Tesla and we talked to the Port of Oakland and we talked to the mayor and we said, let's have a green job summit. And we had a green job fair. So that was our response. And we had it at the Mount Zion Baptist Church in West Oakland. It was pretty well attended. It was still like pulling teeth. But that's the work. And that's going to be a part of our revivals and things now. How do we really connect these dots? And because Green the Church, after that, began to go nationally, then we weren't as present here at home. But our allegiance and our planning right now is to make sure that we're very present at home to be more part of those fights.
Dr. Carroll, I want to thank you for this work because before coming here in New Orleans on the west bank of the Mississippi River, that is an ongoing problem. And as you say, the marginalized and more particularly Black communities are suffering with the coal that is stored and being shipped in open air and causing those who live near there Black lung and those similar kinds of disease and then cancer. And that all is part of a larger system called Cancer Alley. So thank you for the work here.
Bless you. Yeah, with my work, I serve on the advisory committee for the Environmental Protection Agency, the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, and all of the stories. It doesn't matter if it's my migrant farmers, if it's people from Cancer Alley. When we talk about these toxins, it's always a different kind of cancer at the end of the conversation. I have my mom is a breast cancer survivor. My mother-in-law died of brain cancer. She grew up in the Bayview Hunters Point community. All of these pieces, our diets, our movement. I'm presently battling prostate cancer. All of these things are part of our daily cycle, but a lot of times we don't connect the dots and we don't know to be angry about it.
Dr. Carroll, I know that President Biden and Congress passed that bipartisan, barely, infrastructure bill that allotted a lot of money toward the environment in the future. And I'm wondering how you see that impacting your work and whether you're able to take advantage of that for sort of this perspective that you're working at?
Thank you for asking. And the answer is yes. There is, through the infrastructure bill, which is like $150 billion, 40% of that, which I think is like $60 billion or so, is headed towards the African American community. You know, the hard part about that is people on the front lines who've been battling environmental justice, we didn't get, for our frontline communities, we didn't get the legislation that we asked for in terms of the toxicities. So the big oil, the chevrons, those are still poisoning us. What we did get, what we always get, is the financial side. And the trick of the devil is that there's money, but the same polluters and the same communities plan to capitalize off of that money. So there's money that's aimed for our communities. What we're trying to do is organize, where we've been trying to organize for the last 10 years, but because we're so slow, now we have to organize like now in order to put these funds to use. So when I tell you that churches can fully retrofit, it's because of that money. When I tell you that in every agency across the administration, there's money for our communities. So what Green the Church is doing is trying to train us as congregations, make sure everybody has their 501c3. We want to make sure that we can get you the technical assistance that you need for your church or for your nonprofit faith organization to access these funds. I told somebody, if I was just coming out of the seminary, I would start a camping thing for kids. I'd be the camp pastor, and I'd go ahead and give me $300,000 from the Department of the Interior to take young people out to the woods. There's all kinds of things that we can do right now around health, and there's so much money and so many grants. Our fear is that we don't come together enough to access them. And it's more than any one church or one congregation can do alone. And we've been working with the EPA to make sure that on top of that, that church communities, nonprofit communities of color actually have to take the lead on a lot of these grants. So it's not getting a grant from somebody else. We right now have the power to partner with the city, to partner with other businesses or agencies, or to partner with other nonprofits to do large scale things. And so we're not talking about small grants. We're talking about food across this country. We're talking about getting a block grant of $50 million in order to make sure that there's food grown on every church-owned land across this country. And a lot of us have land, hundreds of acres. California State has 120 acres of land we haven't done anything with in 20 years. Church of God in Christ gave us site control of their 400 acres in Mississippi where their school was. So we have to figure it out, and we don't have, we should have started working on it 10 years ago, just making sure that we have the inventory. And so this is a part of the work that we are doing, both on a large scale, but also individually with congregations, finding out ways to train and to do those pieces. And would love to, with BST, find ways to center this conversation nationally, find ways to have more conferences and bring clergy persons in to talk about what we have to do right now.
And that was the perfect last word, Dr. Carroll. Collaboration. That's the only way we can get these things done. Please join me in offering a big round of virtual applause, either with sign or use your emojis. Thank you, Dr. Carroll, for spending this time with us today. We could do, it sounds like 3 or 4 or 5, 6 of these sessions and not exhaust the topics. So we're just so grateful that you would share what you're doing and challenge us. Before we log off, we have 3 announcements. In this leap year, we invite our alumni and others to join us all year long as we leap through doors of opportunity together. We're hosting multiple gatherings through the year, and the first of which is on Leap Day, February 29th. Registration is open, and this special event is free. Please join us for a meaningful time of fun, learning, and community. We invite you to register and leap into connection with us. I believe the registration information is in the chat. Next Thursday, February 8th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, BST will co-sponsor and co-lead a webinar with the Sentencing Project and the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. It will feature a panel discussion, 1 in 5, Ending Mass Incarceration and Its Racial Disparities. BSD's Dr. Joseph Evans, who's here with us today, the director of the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Restorative Justice, will be one of those panelists. So we invite you to join us for that. Again, the registration link is being dropped in the chat. And finally, the next First Friday Lunch and Learn will happen on Friday, March 1st, the day after Leap into Connection Alumni Gathering. It will feature BST alum and professor of ministerial leadership and practical theology, the Reverend Dr. Valerie Miles Tribble, who's also here with us today. Next month, she will speak on the topic, Engaging Women's Voices. Do we listen to learn or do we teach to tell? That will be part of our focus for Women's History Month. You can register for March and other upcoming lunch and learns through the link in the chat. We always meet on the first Friday at 12 noon Pacific time. Thank you again for being here today. Thanks again, Dr. Carroll, and we look forward to seeing all of you very soon. Happy February, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Blessings.